Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen, filming on a beautiful day in Bulgaria, trying to get lots done. We're going to talk today about something that is kind of you might say that I'm late to talk about this one, but the Panama Papers. And this I'm going to discuss because of the fact that I was having some discussion with people in a few other environments, and they were raising some points that they didn't really understand what the consequences of the Panama Papers have been. So I'm going to fill you in on that, and so let's get started. Before we do, click the subscribe button, click the notification bell. I hope you're going to like the video. If you do, click the like button at the end, and yeah, check out our other content. So let's dive in. So first of all, what was the Panama Papers? Panama Papers was a very famous law firm. We did business with them back as well. I think they were number 3 in the world for forming offshore companies, etc., called Mossack Fonseca. Very good company to deal with, actually. Like, I can tell you, we deal with lots of providers all over the world, different law offices, different registry offices, etc., and they were very good. They're one of the best ones. We had, no complaints. Their pricing was very good and fair. Their service was efficient, etc., which probably explained why they were so successful and dealt with that. So they had a leak of like 40 years worth of documents, okay? And, so this exposed that all kinds of famous people had offshore companies, etc. It went out to journalists. They did, graph data analytics on this. They did all kinds of different stuff. It prompted investigations into all kinds of people. It brought the law firm down to basically they got wiped out, and really hurt not just the reputation of them, but the reputation of Panama. Okay, and that's the thing that I'm going to talk about: what it was, what it wasn't, and what the results have been since then. So, first of all, was this some expose of all kinds of illegal activity? Basically, no. Generally speaking, it wasn't that there was some big scandal for all kinds of illegal activity taking place. Of course, people who use international structures may well have used this. There's a Netflix program, I think, called The Laundromat, where they kind of go through and tell this Panama Papers type story. And, they portray kind of a dark side of the whole thing. And certainly it used to be easier to do some things. For example, the utilization of bearer shares, etc. Bearer share corporations are basically impossible to use today. Like, you just can't, you can get them, you can get the company, okay, you could do that. But, and in theory, I guess it could own something, but it can't have banking really anywhere that I can think of. And so it's like, well, what are you going to do with it, right? It's kind of useless. So we totally steer clear of all that kind of stuff. Now, what they would depict is, of course, the person who would get away with some shady stuff because of using an offshore company. And it is definitely true. I'm going to do some videos in the future on kind of scammers and kind of what goes on there. It is definitely true that the tools that are utilized for asset protection can also be utilized to protect criminals. Okay, that is definitely a true thing. That being said, generally speaking, the purpose of offshore companies and the industry of providing companies is nothing shady at all. So let me just kind of give some analogies here to explain to you the context. Company formation agents have really nothing to do with the activities of the businesses that are going on. So somebody might be like, oh, you formed a company for these guys and they were running a Ponzi scheme. Okay, like, you built a website for someone and they were doing it. Is the website designer responsible? Somebody built, a logo for them. Somebody, like, every operation has service providers. Those service providers may have, in fact, in the vast majority of cases, have nothing to do with the core business that is going on. Now, if you're doing specific targeted advertising for a Ponzi scheme, then okay, maybe, right? But that's not the case here. That's not what we're talking about. Basically, if somebody wants to form a company, they have to go to an agent of the registry for that particular country, and that person is going to basically do an administrative process for them of forming a company. They don't check, nor should they check, what that business is. Like, that is not their job. Their job is purely to register it. There's just a ledger that has, hey, here's a company name, here's the date it was formed, here's who the owners are, etc. It's just a spreadsheet, basically. And they're entering you into the spreadsheet, charging you a fee, and facilitating you getting documents. That's it. So to say, oh, these guys were it's just total nonsense. That's not the reality of what takes place, what's going on. And if we want to go down that road, let's point out the fact that probably more money laundering happens in the U.S. than anywhere on the planet. So why aren't you going after the U.S. registries? That's the first thing. And, look, Nevada, Wyoming, Delaware, etc. People form these private companies there. What are you talking about? There is a real mismatch in the expectations and treatment between jurisdictions in this sense. So it's like, oh, great, BVI is so bad. Well, why isn't Delaware so bad? Why isn't Nevada so bad? Why isn't New Mexico so bad? They have more privacy than you get in BVI. So, there's a real, the public view of what's going on does not match the reality of the total tapestry. So that's the first thing, okay? The second thing to look at in terms of this is, okay, what was kind of the controversy? Well, the controversy really is exposing that a whole bunch of very famous and powerful people have these companies. And so if they have these companies, what does that mean? Well, let's look at the perfectly good reasons why you could have an international company. So, for instance, this is a case that isn't necessarily an international company, but when we've done some trust work and dealing with some of our trust providers, etc., we've had some conversations about things. So let's say you're a major company like Google, okay? And you want to acquire some property to build a new data center. Now, if Google shows up and says, hey, we want to buy this, what happens? The price goes up, right? They're like, oh, Google has money. So it is in their best interest not to act directly, okay? They say, hey, listen, I don't want somebody to know that's us. So what you may do is you may form another, like an LLC, and hold it in trust, purely for the purposes of this transaction, so that you can go and you can get a fair price, and then it just settles over to the company when it's done, okay? There's lots of privacy reasons. If you want to say, hey, listen, nobody should have privacy, which is obviously a big debate going on in the world today, right? There's lots of more or less privacy is gone. I'm sitting here recording this on a phone, probably, Facebook and Google and whoever else is listening. All right. NSA, whatever. So privacy is going away. And if you believe that's a good thing, okay, great. Maybe if you're in Denmark, Sweden, where they want to have everybody's tax returns public, fair enough. That's your argument. I think a lot of people are not comfortable with that. And a lot of people do want a degree of their privacy. And so when they buy assets, they don't want it to be on some public register that anyone can look up. They're not doing anything that's wrong. They're simply saying, hey, listen, I'd like to have some privacy. And, so this is a tool under which I can do that. So that happens a lot. Next, yes, there is international tax planning that takes place. This is like a big part of what it is that we do, is we help people to do international tax planning to optimize their taxes. Now, is that a bad thing? No. Why would that be a bad thing? So long as you're doing that within the bounds of the law, that's perfectly legitimate. The reality is that you do it domestically. I don't know anybody who sits there and pays more tax than they can on purpose. You're welcome to. The IRS will take it. The ATO will take it. The CRA will take it. HMRC will take it, and so on and so forth, right? The tax departments are fine with you paying extra money. So if you think that it's somehow a patriotic duty to go and pay more taxes, by all means, go and do it. I think you're stupid, but go and do it. Okay. So then, okay, is there something wrong with doing that using offshore vehicles? No. I mean, let's look at different scenarios here, okay? So somebody is doing business, let's say I'm in Bulgaria right now, so let's say they're doing business between Bulgaria and the US, right? And perhaps if they do business and maybe they have contractors elsewhere, right? So the majority of the business is actually not in either of those countries. Maybe the customers are in the US, let's say that the team is contractors from around the world, and then you have something in Bulgaria. It may make sense for a whole variety of reasons to set up a company in, let's say, BVI. In this case, it doesn't, right? But we're going to use a hypothetical. So this is probably not the greatest hypothetical. I'm pulling this out on the spot. But there may be reasons why that makes sense, okay? A good example of this is Cayman Islands. So Cayman Islands is not necessarily so much popular because of the zero tax environment. That's part of it. But really what they're doing is they're facilitating international investing. So it's very common that hedge funds will set up there. And the whole thing, I'm going to hopefully not get wet. So the hedge funds are there. And the part of the reason for this is they're taking investment from clients all over. Now, let's imagine an alternative scenario, okay? So maybe it's a US-based hedge fund, right? But they're dealing with international customers. So, okay, you go out and you get your customers. Well, do you want your customers who are not US-based to be subject to US tax? That doesn't really make a lot of sense for them. That's going to be an impediment for them. And why should they be, right? They have nothing to do with the US. So instead what you do is you form a company, a fund in Cayman Islands that takes in those funds. It's tax neutral, so it doesn't have, they're still going to pay taxes in their home country, right? That's still where they're taxable. And they're simply not exposed to another country's tax jurisdiction that they have nothing to do with. So that's perfectly reasonable. So yes, are there some situations where people take that and abuse that? Of course there are. Absolutely that takes place. But is that the responsibility of Mossack Fonseca? No. Is that something that should be surprising to people? No. Should there be reform in the rules? Probably. There is reform going on in the rules, in fact. So, one of the things that I found was quite interesting was, through all of this, one of the things they said was this big pressure to make corporate registries public. And it's like, well, they'd kind of already addressed that at the bank level anyway, through automatic exchange of reporting, automatic exchange of information, the Common Reporting Standard. And so, what are we talking about? This brings us kind of to the consequences, though. The consequences, unfortunately, of the Panama Papers is that Panama's reputation generally has been tarnished. Now, in general, since, starting probably around 2009 when the IRS broke UBS in Switzerland, probably around then, you could maybe even go back as far as 2001 with 9/11 and kind of the introduction of the Patriot Act and things like this, but especially, I would say, since around 2009, we've seen a lot of pressure on the offshore industry. There's been a lot of changes to try and make it more difficult. There's generally been this populism, this view that hey, billionaires shouldn't exist, and this gap between rich and poor shouldn't exist, and it's unfair that some people are taking advantage of the rules and stuff. And so the rules have tightened a lot. Okay, the ability to internationally tax plan and save on taxes has certainly changed dramatically. That being said, okay, great, we adapt and we deal with those rules as those rules are. In so much as the rules are what they are, we're going to, work with those rules, because why wouldn't we optimize accordingly? That being said, the consequences, as I said, is that Panama's reputation has definitely been tarnished. So what that means is, for you, if you have a Panamanian residency, that's more likely to cause issues than if you have, say, a Bulgarian residency, right? It's more likely to cause issues than if you have a Malaysian residency. More likely to cause issues than if you have a Cyprus residency, and so on and so forth. So, there's a negative to that. It's the way that it goes. So anyway, I hope that kind of gives some little sense of what's going on there, and just kind of being aware that, okay, unfortunately we have some negative consequences for Panama. Let's, consider that when we're planning our banking, when we're planning our accounting and our operations, etc. Still good residency programs there, pretty easy to move there from that standpoint. It really shouldn't have been, in my opinion, a big thing. I mean, okay, I could see why Mossack Fonseca's clients would be upset, because they were in a situation where, listen, they had their information exposed. They were expecting not to have that information exposed, and that's probably a lesson for other firms in order to apply better encryption and keeping people's information safe. So anyway, hope that helps. If you liked the video, please click the subscribe button, click the notification button, click the like button. If you have something you'd like me to discuss, something you'd like to hear about, put it in the comments below. Go and email us if you want to book a call with me. There's a link below, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. You can book a call. You can also go to offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. We can help you with citizenships, residencies, company formations, trusts, tax planning, asset protection, banking, etc. So anyway, I hope that helps. We're going to see you guys on the next video.